What's going on, chooms? JonJonTheWise here, and I got another Cyberpunk video for you guys. This time we're going to be talking about Black Chrome. That's right, I want to break down a lot of the items in Black Chrome. I'm not going to be talking about rules or anything like that because I want you guys to go out and purchase the book yourself. But I wanted to give you my insight on how this book can help players and game masters alike to enhance their games. But before we get into that, make sure you guys join that Discord community. The link is in the description below. It is a community of people that are just waiting for you to join so we can talk about our favorite games together. Also, follow me on social media at JonJonTheWise everywhere there is social media. And, of course, subscribe to the podcast Tabletop Cyberpunk. This is my podcast about Cyberpunk. I put videos and other stuff on there, interviews as well. And if you want to support this channel, a like, a subscribe, a share, a comment, all those things help immensely. And going to patreon.com/JonJonTheWise is also a very great way to support this channel. I really appreciate all the support from the community out there. And make sure you guys support our sponsor, D10s by ENIFAEL. You guys are looking at the dice on screen right now. It's a beautiful set of dice, D10s only, great for Cyberpunk, high quality, and they're a small business of 2 people working together to make these amazing dice for you. Go to the affiliate link in my description below, and if you go there, I get a little bit kicked back from the sale. D10s by ENIFAEL. Go on down to the description now. Well, choom, if you're watching this video, that means Black Chrome has released and you're chomping at the bit to try to figure out how to use that supplement for your game. Well, there's a lot of ways to do that, actually, and when Artelsorian sent me an advanced copy, the first thing I thought to myself was, this is going to change the game. Much like the Chromebooks of 2020 have changed the game, and it's no accident that that was the previous video to this one. But in this video, I'm going to be breaking down a bunch of items that are in Black Chrome with the hopes that my insight will give you inspiration and give you ideas for combinations and cool things that you can do within your campaign as a player or as a game master. Now, I'm not going to be breaking down rules and copy-pasting rules on here because I really do want you to support Artelsorian Games and go and purchase the book yourself, but I will be giving my insight on a bunch of these items. All right, let's start out with the apps. The apps are really an amazing new feature to Cyberpunk. Now that we're in this time, we understand that applications and cell phones are a big part of our culture, and I think that was the main inspiration, obviously, for the agent. The agent is a lot more than what a cell phone is to us today, but it does have a lot of the functionality, and one of those functions are the applications. There's a lot of really cool apps that give you narrative design as a game master, or narrative ideas, I should say, to be able to move the plot forward and to put your players in a situation that immerses them into the cyberpunk world. So let's start off with that digital gladiator. This is basically a way to duel other NPCs or players within the game for pink slips. It's like a drag race basically, but you're doing it with your phone. And what basically happens is your agent will explode if you lose. And if you have an internal agent, you'll get another special surprise. So it's a really cool way to add some fun stakes to a situation. An NPC could challenge a player to this. Maybe winning against an NPC will help the players enter a nightclub or an HQ or something like that. Or maybe that's how they meet their Netrunner ally. That's an NPC that's helping them. The NCPD crime database is really important. The main thing about it is how long it takes for you to get the information. It's not instant, so because of that, you will have to not completely rely on this app. But if your players have downtime, there's been a bunch of times where they've asked me, is there any way I can like hack into the police database and try to find some information on this dude that we're after? And I'd have to come up with a way to do it that didn't involve an app or involved some way to go onto a website in the CityNet. And I was just basically playing it by ear. But now I don't have to. I could just tell them download the NCPD Database app, and there's public information that you can get through. And maybe as a homebrew, I can decide, yeah, but if you really know how to to hack these apps, then maybe you can get some unauthorized access and make yourself authorized to be able to get some really juicy information. Next up, we have the Trauma Team Medscan. This is basically calling 911 in the time of the red, but 911 doesn't really care whether you make it out or not. You have to have the money and you have to have the time. And if you don't have the patience, they'll just hang up on you, right? So it's one of those services that can help you mechanically in the game to give you some buffs to first aid and stuff like that. But it's also a really great way for a game master to play like an apathetic 911 operator in this really grim, dark world of Cyberpunk Red. In the past, I had no way of telling my players how to call 911 or call Trauma Team, and I had to kind of just guess. But now the guessing game is over. There's an established application for it. The Ziggurat City Database. This is also just like the Night City Police Department database. It is very important. If you want to find the best pizza place, or if you want to find the best place to buy guns and ammo, it's basically Yelp in your pocket for the dark future. I really like it because mechanically it also gives you a buff to your local expert skill. And I think that's really important because I use that skill all the time and I have a cool narrative way to tell my players, yeah, just open your agent and look through the app and see if you can find the thing you're looking for. But the other problem is, which is a good problem, it adds narrative and it adds pros and cons to this thing, is if they're not in the city center, then they're not going to have access to that application. So if they're out in the wilderness, they don't get that buff, they don't get any of those cool mechanics to be able to look through the database. All right, next up, let's talk about cyberware. There's a lot of really cool cyberware in Black Chrome, and there's a lot of new ideas that they've introduced into Black Chrome that I'm just really excited to mess around with as a game master. Right off the bat, I'll let you know that anything you see in this section that is 100 eddies or less is really a great way to give your players loot in the game. I'm not really hardcore into giving loot to my players or providing it or giving them that Diablo experience where loot falls off of NPCs, but I do like the idea of introducing an item to a player that they maybe wouldn't have thought to use in the past, but hey, if they're getting it for free, then now it gives them inspiration to go down a different path with their character. So if you find any of that stuff, and there's some really good stuff that is 100 eddies or less, you can just put that in a box, in a drawer, somewhere where the players are, and with the right kind of skill check, they can find this thing. Now, unless I missed it, I have never seen something like this new mechanic that's in Black Chrome, which is Hardened Shielding. I think maybe it had existed for Cyberdecks in the past or something of that nature, but I don't think I remember seeing it for Cyberlimbs until Black Chrome. And what does Hardened Shielding do? It's basically this new concept where you're immune to EMP attacks. Now, of course, as a player, you're thinking, oh, this is awesome. Now I can finally patch one of the biggest holes in my game, which is having cyberware that can be hit by any EMP blast. But you got to remember, anything the players have, the bad guys can have too. And this is great for the lieutenant, the sergeant, or the big boss at the end of a battle to have hardened limbs, hardened cyberware, hardened optics, all the things that the players will try to manipulate to try to get an advantage. Next up, I want to talk about the pop-up net launcher. Without getting into too many mechanics, this is a really cool way to give police, security, or even players for that matter, a way to capture other people. The reason the pop-up net launcher is so good is because there are specific mechanics on how you can get out of the net once you are caught within it. And if you fail some of these tests and fail some of these mechanics, then it can really put the combat situation in a completely different light. If this happens to your net runner, or if this happens to your solo, who is especially really good at shooting things or doing things with melee combat, this can really be a detriment to your team. It gives players and NPCs the power to basically take one person out of a combat situation and have them delegated to making skill checks to try to get back into the fight. That's how bad it can go. That's like worst case scenario, right? And that can happen easily, especially if there's a bunch of police coming after you. All of them have pop-up launchers, or an entire squadron of them have it. Next up, let's talk about the Reflex Co-Processor. This is huge. I mean, this is one of those items that when I talked to James, he told me, yeah, I know a lot of people are going to be crazy about this item. So there is a rule in Cyberpunk, if you have a Reflex 8 or higher, you are able to evade gunfire or dodge bullets, whatever you want to call it. But if you don't have that, then you're kind of SOL, right? If you have a Reflex 7 or lower, you just can't do it. This Reflex Co-Processor allows you to do it without having a Reflex 8 minimum required. There's some people that took some points off of their Reflex so they could put it in their other stats, and this gives them the opportunity to be able to have that upper hand. Next up is the reinforced Cyberlimb upgrade. This is really interesting because once again, just like the hardened mechanic where you're immune to EMPs, this one makes you immune to certain critical injuries. And I really like that. I love that idea of being able to give your players an upgrade to be able to dodge certain critical injuries. And like I said before, if the good guys have it, the bad guys have it too. You can give this to bosses or sergeants or leaders or any of that stuff. It also gives me the idea in my homebrews to be able to give my players something that makes them immune to specific critical injuries. Next up, we have the Racer Bracer. The Racer Bracer tackles a problem that we've all had since the beginning of the Cyberpunk Red Core rulebook, which is the sacrifice of being able to ram someone with your vehicle. Previously, before this book, you had no option but to take the whiplash critical injury if you hit something with your vehicle. You hit a person, you're going to get that injury. You're going to get -1 to your death save, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but if it ever came down to it and your player died by 1 point from that failed body save, then it's really going to bother you that you ran somebody over with your car, which you thought was a really cool thing to do, and now you lost your character. But have no fear, the Racer Bracer is here, just for you. You can finally be immune to that whiplash critical injury when you are driving a vehicle. So I love this. I mean, obviously we're going to be seeing more people running other people over, and as crazy as that sounds, that's something that people hesitated to do in the past, and they no longer have to hesitate. I mean, obviously, if there's other people in the car that don't have the Racer Bracer, they're going to get the whiplash critical injury, but who cares? That's them. That's not me, right? Next up, we have the Trauma Response Nanomatrix. I mean, this thing is insane. This is one of those things that if you give it to a bad guy that is like bare-chested and has a skin weave, then the players are gonna go crazy because they thought that they brought this guy's SP down, and the Nanomatrix heals his SP to the maximum value, which is insane. It's like when the second health bar pops up on a boss. That's what this can give you. Obviously, it's great for players as well, but when you put it on a bad guy, it just makes it so much scarier with combinations of all the other things. He's got Hardened Shielding, he's got the Nanomatrix, and some of the other things that are within this book as well. Now, I'll quickly touch on the cyber fingers. Obviously, that whole thing this is what Cyberpunk is all about, having extra fingers on your hand, having extra limbs, style over substance, being different, being unique. All these things are peak Cyberpunk. So, of course, there's a lot of really cool things in the fingers. You can have a dart in one, you know, put some blue lace on that, get people high, or you can have like an air hypo finger that has some really messed up biotoxin in it, and you just touch someone on the neck and bada bing bada boom, you're the best hitman in the world. So there's a lot of cool things you can do with these fingers, but it's one of those things where it's a situational thing and it's really a narrative thing. So as a game master and a player, if this is your thing, have fun with it. All right, next up, let's talk about some fashion and armor. There's a lot of cool items within this section that can give you some really fun ways to play in your game. Armor has usually been light armor jack all the way with everybody that I've ever played with. I've had one player actually get an SP8 armor to the point where I don't even know anybody that's gotten any of the other armors. It's true, you can get a tech to do some upgrades on some of the other armors and change them up, but the armors in Black Chrome are really cool options for your players to do some very special things. I want to talk about this shock armor because it gives this really cool mechanic that helps you get out of grappling. The idea is somebody grapples you and you can turn on the shocking mechanism that is in your battle armor, and if they fail a test, then they're going to be shocked and the grapple ends immediately. That's obviously one of the coolest mechanics I've ever seen in an armor. I don't think we've ever seen anything like that in an armor. And it's a really great way to give a player that has a low brawling a chance to be able to escape brawling checks. Brawling has always been one of those things that people have slept on because they haven't really thought of what's so important and significant about it. But being able to grab someone and for them not to be able to escape is really, really important in Cyberpunk. You can use them as a human shield. You basically take them out of the battle, and that whole action economy of them not being in the battle can really change the tide. Next up, the Tactical Smart Armor. This is a no-brainer of a cool item. It has smart glasses built into it. It's an armor with smart glasses in it. So what more do you want in an item like that? You get 2 for 1, something that's so important, and you don't have to spend the extra money on it. It's all in one package. Next up, we have the Montage variable clothing line. Now, these are really interesting. This is something that my players have been kind of battling throughout our campaigns, is what does a light armor jack look like? And per the description of the core rulebook, it's basically like a thick jacket, but not everybody wants to wear like a thick leather jacket as their armor. So how can they get around this? I've previously been telling my players that they can pretty much wear whatever they want, and we'll just say that it's a light armor jack because you got a custom job done a long time ago. This way that my players can have whatever they want narratively, and I can just give them that as an armor jack. Some people don't want to wear a jacket, some people do, some people want to wear some other types of clothing, and I wanted them to have the freedom to wear whatever they want. Well, with this clothing line, you can basically do that. It's now in black chrome. There's colors that can be changed according to what gang you're a part of or whatever way you want to express yourself. There's all kinds of cool stuff that you can do with this line of clothing. It adds a narrative design. It adds a lot of creativity for game masters and players alike. And of course, the executive armor does the same thing as the other one does, but this is for execs. It's a business wear type of clothing, and it gives you the light armor jack armor. It's another cool way for my players to wear whatever they want and still have the stats that they want for their character. The Masetto Holo-Wear. Now, this is a really interesting item. I'd imagine it's the type of item where if you need an outfit for a specific place and a specific time, you don't have the time to go shopping and look for an outfit. This thing has you covered. It's basically an illusion that makes it look like you're wearing a piece of clothing, but it becomes inoperable under some conditions. So just think about that. You're wearing like this amazing suit, and something happens, and now, you know, everybody could see your birthday suit, as they say. But this is the type of thing I imagine an exec has in their suitcase, just in case they need to have the right kind of outfit for the right kind of scenario. So that's basically what this is. Last up, I'll talk about the 2 Mecha Man items. You got the helmet and you got the gloves. I won't go into exactly what kind of mechanics they have, but it's perfect for a bad guy NPC that's on a motorcycle, riding around Night City and guessing every move that the players are making. It makes like a really cool, like evil Knight Rider kind of vibe going on inside of the Cyberpunk Red universe. Next up, let's talk about general gear. Now, this is a giant section with a lot of stuff, and at first glance, it might look like these are just like fun, quirky items that you can have, but some of them have some really cool mechanics that add a new arsenal to game masters and players alike. It's one of those things where there's so many cool, fun rules within this section that game masters and players aren't going to remember all of them. So there's going to be those times where a player drops one of these items down on the ground, does the thing that it's supposed to do, and the game master has to think on their feet because they surely did not think that someone would bust this thing out. Let's talk about the Killstrom Sonic Boom Amp. Now, other than this thing obviously being geared for rocker boys, this is one of those amazing items that introduces something that I've never thought of before. The idea of this item is you put it down, it makes a giant noise, and everybody within the area has to make a skill check, and if they fail, they get a critical injury done to them. The only caveat is they don't take the 5 damage to their HP. Now this introduces something new, it's something different, something I haven't seen before. Giving your players a critical injury without actually giving them the damage to their HP. The damage to their hit points is pretty hardcore. It's 5 straight to their hit points, goes through their armor. There's nothing they can do about it. But imagine giving your players a critical injury because of some kind of trap that you set or something that happened throughout your campaign, and you won't feel as bad about it because you don't actually knock off their HP. But the possibilities are endless here. You can give players a critical injury, you could even give it for a temporary amount of time, and you don't have to feel too bad about it. It's like a status effect that you give them, and they have to deal with it in a short period of time. The Drinkmaster 3000 is one of those cool items that you can bust out, and it immerses your players completely. And obviously, if you have a degenerate of a character as well, you can be carrying this item with you and give people literal street drugs out of your pocket. It's a cool party starter. I can imagine a corporate exec having this in their house, like minimum. It's like the new Keurig, basically, is having this thing that dispenses drinks and street drugs alike. It's a fun narrative thing to do, and it's also a really cool thing for techs to mess with to make some really fun toxin. Next up, let's talk about the Streetcase by SecSystems. Now, the Streetcase is basically like a crazy super briefcase. I can imagine an exec having this thing. It has so many things within it that it can be used as a defense mechanism. It has a gun in it. It has all kinds of really cool items within it, secret compartments. It's one of those things that you drop on the desk of an exec, and if players are snooping around this office, they're going to see this amazing thing sitting on the desk, not know what it is, open it up, and it has all these components and gizmos and gadgets within it. It's also a great jumping off point for homebrew to create your own kind of all-in-one briefcase. It's very much like the Desperado, where he had a guitar case and there's a gun in it. Next up, let's talk about the WorldSat Aerosphere. These are these hot air balloons that are up in the air that extend the access to the city net. This is a great way to introduce internet in the outdoors that are outside of a city, and you can also have this thing be around because the cities are working on them, they're maintaining them, and that leads to a whole plot line where the players have to escort like city workers to one of these things to be able to repair it and not get killed in the process. But either way, it's a new infrastructure in the Cyberpunk Red universe that extends internet access. And if you want, you can say, like in your homebrew world, where in the state of Kentucky, let's say, the entire state has made sure that the infrastructure is there, so there is a Kentucky internet. There's enough aerosphere balloons all over the state that you have internet access everywhere that you go. And because of that, you can get around this whole thing where there isn't a net that is available to you unless you're within a city limit. Well, Chooms, I think that's it for part 1. I hope this intrigued you, and I hope this gave you a lot of inspiration and insight. I'm definitely going to be tackling some of the other items in this book, but it's such a big book and with so many things to talk about that I can't get it all in one video. So I hope you guys enjoy that. I'll see you guys on the next one, and take care. Have a good game. Bye.